Good evening and welcome to this special programme, The Grandchildren's Vigil. What you're about to see tonight is another moment of history. Never before have the grandchildren of a monarch taken their places around the sovereign's coffin as it lies in state. But tonight, Prince William and Prince Harry will stand side by side with their 6 cousins in honour of the Queen. It will be a very moving tribute in Westminster Hall to the woman Prince Harry affectionately referred to as the boss. The queue today has been enormous again. People are waiting 13, 14 hours so that they can file past the Queen's coffin and have a look at what happened earlier on today. Well, King Charles and Prince William surprised people standing in the queue. This was near Lambeth Bridge, people who had been waiting in the cold all through the night. The King and the Prince of Wales spoke to many of them, shook hands, and they told them how grateful they were that so many people had made such an effort to pay their last respects to the Queen. You can see how much they appreciated that. Well, these are the pictures of the queue. I'm sure many of those people there are wondering if they're going to be lucky enough to arrive in Westminster Hall while the Queen's grandchildren are mounting their vigil. What a moment that would be for all these people after so many hours on their feet. Well, the Queen's grandchildren have arrived in Westminster. They swept in just a short time ago. Here they are arriving in convoy. Big crowds out on the streets again to catch a glimpse of them as they arrive here for this moment of history. Well, there's the convoy going in. That was a few minutes ago. Let's go inside Westminster Hall now and join Petroc Trelawney.
I wonder how many of these people who have just walked through the doors into Westminster Hall are pinching themselves, not quite ready to believe that they are actually here. Most have queued for 12 hours or longer, walking slowly along the River Thames. Many will have suffered sore feet, shaken themselves at the moment exhaustion set in, shivered as the morning cool marked a farewell to summer and a nod towards autumn. A change of season, and at the same time, generational change in the royal family. Well, last night the King and his siblings stood vigil by their mother's coffin. Tonight, their children, the Queen's grandchildren, take on that responsibility. None of us can know what it must be like to have a grandparent who was monarch and who'd been monarch for so long. The youngest of her grandchildren only knew her after she became an octogenarian. The biggest change will be for the new Prince of Wales, who's already assumed many of his father's former responsibilities. But perhaps the thoughts of those new duties will be put to one side for a quarter of an hour this evening. For those passing the coffin, a chance to reflect on the 70 years of service provided by the Queen. For the members of her family here, 8 royal cousins, another opportunity to recall a beloved grandmother. Well, this week we've seen the King and Queen Consort in Edinburgh, Belfast and Cardiff, meeting politicians and civic leaders, attending church services and walking amidst crowds of well-wishers. In London, it's this building, Westminster Hall, that has so far been the focal point for the formal moments taking place in this period of mourning. On Monday, the speakers of both houses made an address of condolence. On Wednesday afternoon, a solemn service marked the arrival of Her late Majesty's coffin, and an hour or so later, the first members of the public were allowed in to pay their respects. Last night's royal vigil echoed the night in 1936 when Edward VIII and his siblings stood around the bier in honour of their father, George V. This is the first time a monarch's grandchildren have ever mounted a vigil. Well, we're expecting that the Prince of Wales will stand at the head of the coffin. He and his brother, the Duke of Sussex, will both be wearing military uniform. They will stand alongside Zara Tyndall and Peter Phillips, the Princess Royal's children, the Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, and Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn, children of the Earl and Countess of Wessex and Forfar. So in about, 8 or 9 minutes' time, on a tap of the duty officer's stick, the Queen's grandchildren will come down the steps at the north end of Westminster Hall. They'll walk slowly into the centre of the room, where these officers of the Welsh Guards, just about to take up their position as the new watch, with the gentlemen-at-arms and the yeomen of the guard, will be waiting for them. Then, on another signal from that stick, the royal party will collectively lower their heads and mount vigil around the coffin of their grandmother, the Queen.
Well, what a moment that will be. I'm joined in the studio by the Sunday Times royal editor, Roya Nika, and by Paddy Harvison, who was former communications secretary to the then Prince Charles and Princes William and Harry for nearly 10 years up until 2013. Hello, good evening to both of you. It will be extraordinary, won't it?
This is an amazing moment. Like you said, we've never seen this before. It's historic. And I think it really speaks right to the heart of the importance of family to the Queen, the importance her grandchildren felt about that role, her as matriarch. I think there's going to be something exceptionally poignant and moving to see the 8 grandchildren, one of them is incredibly young, standing in vigil by her side for the first time. We've never seen it. It's an incredible sight.
And there's a big age gap, isn't there? The oldest, I think, is 44, the youngest is 14.
Yeah.
But they're a close bunch, aren't they?
They're a very close bunch, and I think what was really interesting was the mood music we got from the palace this week when we were asking, will there be a grandchildren's vigil? And it was very much, this is up to them, it's what they want to decide. So they've obviously been talking about it this week and felt they wanted to pay their respects by Granny's side, as their parents did last night.
And you've seen that, Paddy Harvison, you've seen it up close, haven't you? You've spent many years alongside the royal family and witnessed that relation, that interaction between the grandchildren and their grandmother.
Yes, I mean, I think in any family there's always a special relationship between grandchildren and grandparents, and I think it's the same for the royal family. But there's that other twist, of course, that there's a sort of formal side. So William and Harry served in the forces. Harry obviously in conflict, and so they were serving their grandmother, and yet there also there was a very personal, close relationship. So it's always that mix of the personal and the constitutional, which I find so striking. We've seen that this week, and we'll see it tonight.
And Prince Harry tonight will be wearing his military uniform, won't he?
He will. It's the first time we're going to have seen him in military uniform, I think, since 2020, when it's his last engagement as Captain General of the Royal Marines. There's been a lot said and written about whether Harry should or shouldn't, would or wouldn't be in uniform. I think the important thing to remember for this is that Harry, as you said, served 10 years in the armed forces. He did 2 tours of Afghanistan. He was a veteran. He is a veteran. And his grandmother was his colonel-in-chief. It's important he's in uniform today.
And you know what that will mean to him?
So much. I remember he did an interview when he was in Afghanistan talking about what it meant to him to be out there as a soldier for serving his grandmother. And I think we know there's been sort of ups and downs recently, but I think this is a really special moment for him. And I know his father will have been supporting this decision, and I think his brother too. So I'm really pleased that he's going to be in uniform.
And we've got a real insight into what it means to the grandchildren, because we've heard already. I mean, Prince William, Prince Harry, they've spoken about their grandmother since she passed away. But we've just had a statement this evening from Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, and they say, we've not been able to put much into words since you left us all. There have been tears and laughter, silences and chatter, hugs and loneliness, and a collective loss for you, our beloved Queen and our beloved Granny. And they speak about the moments they spent picking heather and raspberries, marching soldiers, teas, comfort, joy. You get a real sense of the divide, really, don't you? The Queen, having your Queen as a grandmother, but also the very personal family connection there.
I think that's what we've seen in each of the tributes that have come every day since, from the children and the grandchildren. You see there, you can really picture the Queen giving them their teas, doing marching soldiers with them, picking raspberries and heather. It's the sort of behind the crown image you get, particularly from the grandchildren, and I think that really speaks to the really moving scene we're going to see at 6 o'clock this evening. That is an incredibly sweet personal tribute, and especially the bit at the end where they say, we're really happy you're back with Grandpa.
I know, exactly. It's very difficult for any family at a time like this when you've lost somebody so close to you, but to do this in the full glare of the world's media, and we've got these 8 grandchildren who are now going to stand around their grandmother's coffin in full view. It's hard to imagine what that must be like for them.
I mean, I'm particularly thinking of the youngest, Viscount Severn. I mean, it's just going to be, I mean, I know he'll rise to the occasion. I think it'll be less difficult for William and Harry. I mean, you know, they're probably much more used to, they are much more used to this. But I think the fact they're all together, I think that's what's so wonderful about tonight, is that all the grandchildren, and I believe they've asked for this, and the King gave his blessing. So that's what makes it so special. They want to pay this tribute to their grandmother, and to see them all together. I'm just trying to imagine what it might be like at the moment behind the scenes as they're all encouraging each other, and particularly the youngest. So, you know, I think it's just so special.
As Prince Edward's son, who is the youngest, I think his 2 children are 18 and 14 years old, and actually have been exposed to a lot less of this, haven't they? The full glare of publicity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, it will be hard for them, but the family will rally round. I mean, they're like any other family, so they'll look after each other, and they'll make sure they're fully prepared, properly briefed. I mean, the family's very good at planning things and getting ready for state occasions, and so, yeah, I'm really confident that they'll rise to the occasion, as I said.
And what about the people who will be passing through Westminster Hall at this very moment? Because they really have waited. I've spoken to people who've been in that queue 13, 14 hours today, and they're only in there for 5 minutes, but there will be some people who see that moment of history as well.
It's extraordinary. I was watching the vigil last night, and I actually was watching some of the people that were filing past, and they just gazed in complete astonishment to see the King and his siblings standing vigil, and I think to see the future King with his brother and his cousins is going to be an equally astonishing moment for them.
Well, let's go inside Westminster Hall, because we're expecting Prince William, Prince Harry and their cousins to mount their vigil in just a moment. So let's go back to Petrock, who is in Westminster Hall.
The Orb and Sceptre Commission for the coronation of Charles II in 1661 sit on top of the coffin, with the imperial state crown remade for the coronation of the Queen's father in 1937. Over 3,000 gems, one that stands out, the blue Stuart sapphire, the jewel thought to have been smuggled abroad by James II when he fled England, only returned in the 19th century during the reign of George IV. Well, a few of those filing into Westminster Hall now may have just picked up the fact that they are going to share their time here with the Queen's grandchildren. But none can have had any idea of the unusual nature their moment of respectful pilgrimage would take when they joined the queue hours ago. So we will see standing vigil the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Sussex, the Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, Zara Tindall, skilled equestrian, former BBC Sports Personality of the Year, her brother Peter Phillips, who was the Queen's first grandchild, and Lady Louise Windsor, who's just started her studies at St Andrews University, where the Prince of Wales also studied and met his wife, and her brother James, Viscount Severn, aged just 14, the Queen's youngest grandson. Current watch being taken by officers of the Welsh Guard, along with His Majesty's bodyguard of the Honourable Corps of Gentlemen at Arms and the yeomen of the Guard. Interestingly, earlier on today here they were joined by members of the Royal Company of Archers, the monarch's bodyguard in Scotland, an organisation that dates back to the middle of the 17th century when it was founded as an archery club. In a second now. There we go. The stick, the sound ricocheting off the stone of the floor here in Westminster Hall. And in just a moment we should see the 8 royal cousins, the Queen's grandchildren, coming to stand vigil in front of her coffin. There'll be a brief pause of these people filing past as the royal party takes up its position. Prince of Wales, leading his brother and his cousins down the stairs in the north corner of Westminster Hall. Three more taps, a signal to move forward. The cousins will stop again, wait further instruction to mount the catafalque. Prince of Wales taking his position at the head of the coffin. And in just a moment, this royal vigil by the Queen's grandchildren will begin. the end of the royal vigil by the Queen's grandchildren here at Westminster Hall. Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex wearing the uniform of the Blues and Royals. Prince of Wales served in the regiment before he became an RAF pilot. Duke of Sussex reached the rank of captain and served 2 tours in Afghanistan. Duke given special permission to wear his uniform at this vigil by his father. And you probably spotted the Earl and Countess of Wessex looking on from the side as their children stood with their cousins, a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old, mourning their beloved grandmother. Familiar faces this evening, including that of the heir to the throne, but also faces we see very rarely. Viscount 7 Lady Louise Windsor, Zara Tyndall and Peter Phillips, who don't have official titles and have chosen to lead essentially private lives. The Duke of Sussex now living in California, but tonight here to honour his beloved grandmother. The Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, both working outside the palace, but also serving as royal patrons to charities operating in spheres including medicine, music, education and animal conservation. What must it have been like to have shared your grandmother with the nation? Peter Phillips, 44, the Queen's oldest grandson, has said she was an inspirational person throughout his life. The Duke of Sussex, in his tribute, spoke of his dual relationship with her. First, childhood memories of early meetings, and then as a young army officer, encountering her as his commander-in-chief. Once again this evening, a very public act of private mourning, which it feels that we've been privileged to witness. Her Majesty the Queen's grandchildren standing vigil to their grandmother.
Well, what a moment for the Queen's grandchildren, what a moment as well for the people who have waited so long to file past the Queen's coffin in Westminster Hall. I'm here in the studio with the Sunday Times royal editor Roy Nika and Paddy Harvison, who worked for the then Prince Charles and with Princes William and Harry for a good 10 years. You know them well, Paddy Harvison. What did you make of that moment, watching them there?
Oh, it was incredibly moving. I think you could see that they were drawing strength from being there together, all the grandchildren, especially the 2 young ones, I imagine. Their parents were watching. So, I'm difficult to find the words, really, but the strength that they showed, the courage they showed, and the tribute they've paid to their grandmother, I think they will be very proud. And I think it was wonderful that the King, gave them special permission to do this, first time it's ever happened.
Because it was the grandchildren who wanted to do it, wasn't it?
Yes, and it shows you how close that relationship was. As Petrock said, it's it's a family, but it's also the nation. They shared their grandmother with the nation. But for them, she was a wonderful presence in their life. If we'd heard from the tributes tonight from Eugenie and Beatrice of those memories of their time together with her, and I just think it was just so special. And
Roy, you could see the strain showing for some of them, couldn't you?
You could, even from the way some of them were standing and the expressions on their faces. I thought their composure was astonishing, particularly from, as you say, James Viscount 7 and Sophie and Edward were there. The palace have said they were there to support their children this evening. But I think, as Paddy said, what an incredible moment for the grandchildren to do. That'll be a memory for them for the rest of their lives, and I think they'll feel very proud that they dug really deep and found the ability to do it. That cannot have been easy.
And Princess Eugenie had her eyes closed, it seemed. It must have been extraordinary for them there, standing there so close to their grandmother's coffin, and yet all these people filing past whilst they were doing it.
I mean, that goes right to the heart of the extraordinary role of being a member of the royal family and having so little division between the public and the private. We've heard so much about the private lives in the tributes we've heard, particularly from the Princess's tribute tonight, but then to see them standing there, watched by probably many millions of people this evening, for such an intimate, personal moment, I can't even begin to fathom how on earth they found the composure to do that so incredibly calmly.
And you know just how close they were to their grandmother. They had their Christmases together, didn't they, at Sandringham? They had their summers, and they've spoken. That was at Balmoral. They've all spoken very movingly about the time that they spent with their grandmother and that kind of relationship they had.
Yes, and I think probably their times in Scotland would have been the most special, because that was when the family could just be the family. And we've all heard about the picnics and of the Duke of Edinburgh, doing the barbecue, and the Queen have just been the grandmother of everyone. I can picture it, and all the children running around, and just those. When you're always under scrutiny, when your family belongs to the nation, when you have that privacy, and anyone who's ever been fortunate enough to go to the Balmoral estate, it's such a beautiful place. So to be able to have those memories, I think will be giving them strength as they were standing there, I'm sure.
It was very powerful watching them all walk out together. How close are they as a group, though, those 8 cousins?
Very close, and closer probably than typical cousins, because of the fact that they are the nation's first family, as it were. I was particularly moved to see William as the sort of senior, not the eldest, but the senior of the grandchildren, leading the way. Now that he's Prince of Wales, I think it's easy to overlook the fact that he's taken on this greater role. And I know his shoulders are strong enough to bear it. I mean, I found that very moving.
He's spoken a lot, hasn't he, about how much he has watched the Queen and learnt from the Queen in the role that will one day be his.
Yes, and I think that's one of obviously the great strengths of our system, is that the generations learn from each other, and in the same way that the now King will have learned from his mother. Prince William studied for many years and was very close to his grandmother, and everyone always talks, of course, Harry had a very special bond as well, but William, having had a different destiny, will have been learning as well as being just the grandson of a normal grandmother.
I love the way some of the references, some of the tributes the grandchildren have paid to their grandmother. Harry referencing how he called her the boss, didn't he?
Yeah, it was wonderful. But she was his boss of the family, boss of the armed forces. And I think the other lovely thing about what you were saying, you see William there in that very senior role, taking on, he's now the heir to the throne. But what's lovely about that tribute that we've just seen is that, they were all equal grandchildren to the Queen. Yeah. She didn't have favourites just because one was more senior than the other in the pecking order. They were all incredibly special to her, and I think it's lovely that they've all agreed to do it together.
And we saw Prince Harry in his military uniform.
And we saw Prince Harry in his military uniform with his brother. Interesting, both in the same Blues and Royals #1 dress. They were both commissioned into the Household Cavalry. I think both would have felt incredibly proud to wear it again, particularly Harry, who has not worn it for 2.5 years, and of course for 10 years. Really, really important moment for him.
And Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex's children, the youngest, they're 18 and 14 years old. Quite something watching young James standing there alongside his cousin. Sophie and Edward, out here earlier today, talking to the crowd, greeting them, saying thank you to them. We don't see their children that much in public, do we?
Well, that's right. And Louise turned 18 this year. She's not using her HRH styling. She has a private life. She's going off to university. They're not out on manoeuvres all the time, and so to come out and do something like that in front of millions of people watching, and that moment, people walking past, must have been absolutely extraordinary. I thought it was a really good thing that their parents were there keeping a careful watch over them, but they did absolutely incredibly.
And we already heard from Prince William about the procession that we saw when they left Buckingham Palace here, and the Queen's coffin was taken to Westminster Hall, and he told people when he greeted them at Sandringham just how difficult that moment had been. It obviously brought back memories for him of his own mother's funeral.
Yeah, and that's only natural. I just keep coming back to just the strength they're showing, the courage they're showing. To be doing all of this in front of not just the watching nation, but the watching world is quite remarkable, and the poise that they show. And I could also imagine just watching that. I also thought about the King, about how he must feel watching that, seeing his sons and his nieces and nephew do that. I mean, I think he will be enormously proud of them too.
And then we have on Monday another procession, and they will once again follow the coffin, won't they?
They will, and I think, again, with the procession on Monday and what we've just seen just now, that extraordinary, unique, historic moment, is unity. And unity is so important for the royal family at the moment. We have heard so much in the last few years about discord and disagreements, but they are coming together, they are pulling together, the brothers, the cousins, the wider family, and they are these great sort of symbolic shows of unity I think are really important for the nation as well, as we kind of look forward to the future of the monarchy. But looking forward to the procession on Monday, yes, we will again see the Prince of Wales. and Prince Harry and other members of the royal family. And again, I'm sure they will hopefully be able to show the same kind of composure.
And let's talk about the very small number of people who will have had the privilege of witnessing that. I went yesterday and stood outside Westminster Hall and watched the people as they came out. And it was really moving. And lots of people bursting into tears as they came out, the emotion just sort of taking them over. It really has. It's affected people more deeply than they thought.
Absolutely. And I think, again, watching just that ceremony there, that vigil, is the stillness and the silence with the gentle movement of the... And one thought occurred to me, and we've seen this all week, is that I think the members of the royal family also draw strength from the presence of the people. We've seen that with some of the small walkabouts of saying thank you for being here. But I think, one thought I had was, that the family is mourning, and the nation puts their arm around them to comfort them. And I think having, in a way, at that vigil, if it had been empty, it might not have been so special. And I think having public filing past while the grandchildren were there, I think that was remarkable.
Paddy Harverson and Veronica, thank you both very much. Well, let's go back to Petrock in Westminster Hall.
The stream of people keeps flowing, thousands of people passing by the coffin every hour. There is a real intensity here, and I think an honesty too. I'm sure some people have carefully planned the response they'll make as they pass by Her Majesty, but you get the sense that many are deeply moved in ways that they might not have expected. Perhaps the act of queuing has had an impact with its very British camaraderie. Friendships formed, Mancunians meeting Bristolians, Americans chatting to Londoners, Liverpudlians, Aberdonians, people from Northern Ireland and the Bahamas, people swapping stories, sharing warm jackets and fetching each other cups of tea. And then at the end of it, a brief, precious moment, standing next to the catafalque and paying personal respects. Well, a reminder, if you can't be here yourself, there is a continuous stream from Westminster Hall around the clock on the BBC iPlayer, the red button, BBC Parliament and on the BBC website. I think that the first thing that strikes those coming into this hall is the hush. Not silence. Earlier on you could hear a helicopter above and the crowds outside and someone in Parliament Square singing the national anthem. Inside, though, with a thick carpet muting the sounds of visitors' feet, there is a focused quiet, a quiet that will continue for the 36 hours that remain of the Queen's lying in state. This is such a vast room, an impressively grand space. There's nothing to obstruct the view. It feels as if the eyes of every visitor are focused solely on the royal coffin. Everyone shares a common reason for being here, but everyone's response when they get here is unique. Each visitor finding their own way of saying farewell to Her Majesty the Queen.
Well, more extraordinary moments of history, more extraordinary scenes that continue to unfold here in London. The queue along the Thames, the constant flow of people coming to Buckingham Palace. Tomorrow, presidents, prime ministers, monarchs from around the world will descend on the palace for a reception hosted by the King. There'll be a national minute's silence in memory of the Queen at 8 tomorrow night. You can join us on air from 7 p.m. tomorrow as we look ahead to the state funeral on Monday. For now, from all of us here at Buckingham Palace, goodbye.